On this channel, we've looked a lot at the Great Lakes area. As you look at this map, we've done Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Rochester, covered Hamilton and Alive. We've done Syracuse, Detroit, Ann Arbor. So it made a lot of sense for me to take a look at the town of Erie, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next 30 minutes. So I've put together a file of Erie, Pennsylvania for you. And first, of course, the geography. Erie, Pennsylvania, that little sliver of Pennsylvania that gets a bit of shoreline from Lake Erie. Of course, I'd like to show you the population demographics down through time. Modern day, we're less than 100,000, peaking somewhere in the 60s, it looks like, 1960s. Population 50,000 at the turn of the 20th century. Many of the buildings we're going to be looking at were built in this time period when they had less than 50,000 people living in Erie. And despite being busy at the docks and the rail yards and the locomotive construction rail yards, they also had the workforce to build these type of structures, apparently. Or so we're told. And of course, if you follow this channel, you know that what we are speculating is that many of these buildings were actually already in existence, and we have been sold a reset narrative and given a very thin backstory for this time period. Here you can see the very well-worn streets of Erie and the rail cars, and of course a centennial celebration. And I don't have the year for this, but you have the dates at least. And we like to investigate the architecture and try to reconcile that with the historical narrative we are given of these regions. This is the Majestic Theater. And you have a nice photograph here of the trolley car travel. Look how many people they could fit on these things. Nice open air style of transportation. Would have been quite a nice Sunday afternoon to take the kids on the trolley car. But when I look at a lot of these old photographs, I have trouble with the multi-storied aspect, the very permanent building materials that were in use. The historical narrative really tells us they were building with wood in a ramshackle manner until we get into the 20th century, really. But what we see, and this is one of the hospitals, and you can see here, is some sort of extravagance, architectural extravagance. We speculate that these were, there was a form of antiquitech being applied to these buildings in which they had some sort of relationship with the energy of the ether. This is the Academy High School. Interesting look here. You can see in the postcard the sunken stadium, and you do see this from time to time across the states. And a very interesting shot just to give you an idea of the permanence of the architecture being used at the time. And maybe you'll say to me, this can't possibly have any merit to it. It's just a conspiracy theory. I know for certain what happened in the past because it was passed down to me, or I have access to the archives, and I would say to that that the story has not been passed down in an honest way. And if you're getting that through family members or friends, you have to question, I think, the accuracy of that no matter what. Here we have an orphans asylum. A large part of the speculation on the historical narrative has to do with the large amount of orphans that existed in that time period, that late 1800s time period, a time when we were just getting on our feet industrially, we are told. Here's a good view of a very dirty looking street. I would wager that these are all cobblestone roads or cobbled brick. And yet we still have the multi-storied extravagance from a very early time periods, the old bank and library, we are told. I'd expect to see something more like this. You can see actually this is a contrast here of the two styles. And I think this is where the false front comes from, where the wooden structures they're trying to make them look like the old brick structures. They're just trying to imitate a look, I think. And there is no shortage of churches in Erie, especially for, again, a time when there's, 50,000 people there. This is St. John's Church. I could find no other visual evidence of this one. We have a nice looking dance hall. Now this could have been made by the inheritors, mimicking certain forms of style. I can see that for sure. It's a nice looking structure, but doesn't scream at me old world, but worth a look. We have several fountains in Erie. If you're familiar at all with the old world Antiquitect narrative, there's a cooling process or a grounding process that goes on with the energetics of the buildings, and the fountains intricately linked with that system. Now, one strange part of Erie's history has to do with the Erie Gauge War. Apparently 3 gauge types of railroad tracks converged upon Erie, and when it came time to standardize the gauge in the States, we are told the citizens of Erie, I think this is in the 1880s, scratch that, it was 1853 and 1854. The citizens of Erie, led by the mayor himself, set fire to bridges, ripped up tracks, and rioted to try to stop the standardization. So there's a destruction narrative going on there. Fire. Why would you set fire to bridges in your own town? Come on. Ridiculous. So we have an Elks Home again, 4-story. Very interesting looking structure. Masonic building. This one doesn't look all that interesting in the postcard. I could find no other version of it. Perhaps it still stands, but couldn't find anything recognizable. I'm sure there's a lot more going on up here than we can tell in this postcard. And you have a handful of mansions, as we always get. The robber baron style individuals. This would be C.H. Strong's residence. You can see the lions here. The triple arch entryway. The Erie Trust Company building. One of the early ones, having that wonderful mansard style roof with all the dormers and tech along the top. And we'll keep moving. No shortage of these 3-4 story structures. Again, remember how much it would take to build all of this at that early time period. And you'll notice that so many of these structures having basement levels. All this being done at a time before there were any sort of power tools that we are being told. Before really hydraulic technology takes off. That doesn't really happen until the 1900s, which is a large part of the heavy-duty machinery that we use in the modern day to move, to dig, to move heavy objects. So none of these things available to the people at that time period. So we have to keep that in mind. And despite that fact, we don't even build to the quality standards that they were supposedly building to back then. I like this one, the old lady's home. Nice looking roundhouse there with the rail yards. Again, remember a convergence of rail lines in Erie, Pennsylvania. And you'll notice that many of these are postcards, and that means that I had difficulty finding photographs of many of these structures. But you can imagine you have the fish hatchery here, you have a tower on the fish hatchery, you can see even here the stonework on the bottom, the arches, the brickwork. Completely over the top extravagant for a city, a small city at that time period. And if you had no friends, you had a place to go. This was the home for the friendless. I imagine, as you could see all the children here, that this is another form of um, orphans asylum, orphans home. So you have this narrative again, very strong in Erie. You have the secret societies, you have a heavy church presence, and a lot of orphans. So we are ticking those boxes. The old world reset boxes. So rather than looking at history as that linear chronology that they teach us in school, I suggest questioning that timeline, because it really is not very well laid out and quite obvious that something is not right about it. And I certainly encourage you to explore that and explore that in your own towns and regions. Maybe you're going on holiday to a city or an interesting old world looking town. Pull out the camera, send me those pics. I'll make a video. I'll be happy to highlight any sort of boots on the ground photos or videos that you guys find. Here's a new Chamber of Commerce, built to the slope, of course. The engine works. Early on, 1860s, I believe it was, the engine works takes off in Erie. Now the city of Erie gets an early War of 1812 narrative for us to kick off the timeline, really. You had the French fur traders, and then the War of 1812, and then the railways. And it's, again, like I say, it's a very thin backstory. Despite all that, we get high schools that are built like European cathedrals, I guess. An absolute ghost. You can find very little on that. We have a city hall that is also an absolute ghost. Unfortunately, very interesting looking building. Interesting here too. Oh, we can't see it, it's behind the tree, but this little offshoot here, there's certainly no real function to building in such a manner. No reason to build that unless there is a function to it. We have the courthouse. Now they say this is the new courthouse, new county courthouse, and we have just the courthouse. So I assume that they're trying to say that there's an expansion here. I'm not sure. There's a little shot of the interior. Who's doing the painting in Erie? Let me guess, they're bringing in the big guns from the cities. Of course, they're busy as heck in the cities doing all of this as well. So. Now this has got to be at least 100 cities in North America that I've covered here on this channel so far. Very little of this surprises me anymore, but it really was everywhere, and the sheer volume of old world architecture is quite staggering, and I think there's a strong case now to be made for a revision of history, or a review at least of our historical narrative. In a very serious way, I mean that we need to look at the problems with our timeline. Either that or reveal the technology that was being used at that time that allowed them to build in such a manner. Of course, I think that the dates for a lot of the construction of these have been skewed, and they are quite a bit older than we are being told. And it falls in line with the cataclysm that I speculate occurred here, and many others have speculated as well, when you get into a lot of the melted buildings or buildings damaged by something that's very difficult to explain. You recognize that there was a great cataclysm here, and some survived, I think, and some did not. Here we have the almshouse, the county almshouse, 1871 to I'm not sure, 19 something, 19 teens. This is the type of thing they were building in the 1870s in Erie, at a time when the population of Erie was 20,000 people. Now, this is on the outlying area of Erie, but Erie is still the biggest city in this county. Nice looking panel. This one really giving us a look at the mud flooding going on in certain areas. You can see the low windows being covered up, and then the lower level down here. And as you get down here, you could see openings along the bottom. I pulled this one from the Wikipedia page on Erie, and you can see all the church-style buildings peppered all around. Speaking of, we have the First Presbyterian Church, also apparently the Masonic Hall. And that's the interior. Looking a lot like some of the Masonic Halls I've seen in Philadelphia and Indianapolis, I believe. They have that sort of similar, very tight stonework. Why wouldn't you take the best of the best if you're finding all this free masonry? We have a hospital with the cupolas. Again, just a little bit more flair than you'd think. If there's any sort of rush to be building a hospital for the people, again, this is going to add however much time to your construction timeline and delay the opening of this structure. When no doubt they would have said that hospital needed to be open as soon as possible. But no, they had time to build the little tower and to do this little mansard dome-style peak and a little cupola on top. The Hammett Hospital. The public bathing area, I like this one. Like I said earlier, you can take the electric trolley car with your kids, get an ice cream, and go down to the public bathing area down on the lake. Looks like it would be a lot of fun. And like I always say, if you're from the area, please add your 2 cents, even if you're looking to hack me to bits with all the things I've said in this video, which I do get. I understand you're defending your city, and you don't like the conventional narrative you have been taught, so you feel the need to take a stand and defend it. And I understand that. I absolutely understand that. You have reason to be proud of the place that you live and the history, but the history we have been taught is a deception. And we need to demand answers. So rather than taking it at face value, what you're being told about the place that you live, ask the questions. Can they really have built that in that short period of time? Did they not take a break for winters? Things like that, right? All need to be considered in these building timelines. And you don't need to be in the building trades to understand that the timelines that we are given don't make a lot of sense. It's quite obvious. You just need to look around you. So this is an interesting look at a dirt-covered street with the rail cars already intact, and no question in my mind that we have those cobbles in the streets as well. And this is looking like quite an early photograph. I don't have a date on it. This is looking like a city that's been around for a long time, not of course the narrative we're given. And I kept this one in there because I find it very, very creepy, actually. They had a place called Kittyland, and you had clowns like this inviting kids to come and play. And I'm sure people had a lot of fun there, but something underlying with that pops up in my videos from time to time. Another thing that pops up from time to time is the flood narrative, where much of these locations gets destroyed and has to be rebuilt. Now we were looking at a depiction of the Lawrence Hotel, or the Hotel Lawrence. We are told built in 1911. We don't have a timeline on that build, just as 1911. We're also told that they added 3 stories to this after, which is interesting. I always find it interesting that they do that. Not looking like a lot in this postcard, but we have an interior shot here, giving you a sense of that detail. Now, were they able to bang this off really, really quickly in 1911 in Erie, Pennsylvania, or has this been around for a lot longer? We have another interior shot for you here. Again, very high ceilings. We have murals painted as well. This thing gets torn down in 1968. So let's do the quick math here. 1968 minus 11, 57 years this thing stood. Well, the house I live in right now has been standing for over 70 years. It's really got to make you wonder, why would they tear these down in such short order? And we move on to the library. This thing apparently built in 1897. Again, we don't have a timeline on construction. We're just given 1 year. Now, are we to believe it all happened in 1 year, or is there some sort of archive hidden away in one of these buildings that gives us all the details that dispels all myths. Look at the detail on this thing. 1897 in Erie. Less than 50,000 people living there at the time, but they're building libraries that look like this. They're putting statues like this in their libraries. Interesting. The very interesting cemetery as well in Erie. Here's just one of the mausoleums that you can find. And you can see the polished granite there. The cemetery is also worth a closer look in these locations. Alright. A little confusing as well, as there's Erie in New York, and there's Erie in Indiana. You got counties and cities, and doing the research on this stuff sometimes is difficult. Sometimes you get a photograph that sneaks in that shouldn't be there, so I always apologize for that, but a lot of volume, dealing with a lot of volume, very difficult to sift these things out sometimes. The Mercyhurst complex, that's what you were seeing here. Apparently this is as well. Hard to make a lot of it out, but you can get a sense of the architecture again. Must have been those German and Irish and Italian immigrants building all this. With, of course, hordes and hordes of slaves. They're all part of the Mercyhurst complex or area. This is North Park Row. I like this wrought iron fence work going all the way down the street. That's a lot of work right there. A lot of work. There certainly is something about the slopes on the sidewalks at this time period. Like they're just trying to figure all of it out, and it's just covered in mud. I think they're putting a lot of the mud down, or keeping a lot of the mud down, to keep it easier on the wagon wheels and the horse hoofs. And we do get some very early depictions of some of these structures of the old Downing building. Even the drawing is depicting what I was just describing. And of course you have the basement levels, more wrought iron. Apparently this is the same structure. Past its prime though. No, and I have two postcards of this structure. One tells us it's the Opera House. One tells us it's the theater. Of course, as I always say, if you are local and know more about the region or any of these structures, please don't hesitate to put that in the comments section. Park Row got his own Presbyterian church. We've already seen one Presbyterian church. Here's another one. Here's the old post office. Again, I had trouble finding information. Federal Building and Post Office. This postcard looking like it's from 1901, and it looking very old even at that time. So, I don't. Again, if you know anything about this area, please let me know. What happened to this post office? When did they tear it down? I'm guessing they tore it down in the 60s. I'm going to speculate and say at some point they chopped all this off, and it was a flat top building for a couple decades, and then eventually they tore it down and got rid of it completely. Complete speculation, but I have seen it happen in many other places. And of course the early narrative with the horse-drawn horse. Does that look real? Does it look like a part of the photograph? The horse-drawn streetcars. Okay, the Reed House I did get a timeline for. You can see 1875 to 1933, just over 60 years. Again, you're demolishing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6-story structure with basement windows in a small city. Why? Is it that dilapidated? Was it allowed to become dilapidated? You can imagine the resources you would need just to tear this thing down in 1933. Somebody would have to fund that entire operation. And it implies some sort of coordination, I think, going on with the destruction of many of these magnificent structures. And if you're not aware, I did compile 2 books on demolished buildings in North America. You'll find those links in the description if you're interested in those. They make a good coffee table style book. Maybe you know somebody who's not familiar with the narrative, old world narrative, but the architecture speaks. The visuals speak thousands of words, really. This is the Reed Mansion, we're told, although that looks like the courthouse back there. Part of the same complex, probably. a little bit of ceiling work. The finial action is just spectacular here in the Reed Mansion. Used as the Erie Club as time goes by. It still stands. There it is today. Massive columns, spectacular looking lights. Moving on to the St. Peter's Cathedral. And this beautiful looking church gets its own Wikipedia page. And just a quick correction, it's the St. Peter. There's no S. St. Peter Cathedral. They're saying it was founded, nice, in 1873, February of 1873. We have a bit of a timeline we can reach to here. It says here that the stones for the foundation came from the locks of the Erie Extension Canal, which closed in 1871. There's a bit of an idea for your timeline. So to get those stones from the foundation to completion are less than 2 years. Give me a break. And it's a little bit confusing here also because here's the groundbreaking. Anyway, let's get to Patrick Keeley, the architect. I wanted to show you this. Apparently he was a prolific designer of nearly 600 churches. We've seen this narrative before. And hundreds of other institutional buildings for the Roman Catholic Church. This gentleman is most certainly a placeholder. And I promise you I will get to Patrick Keeley, the architect, another time. That guy needs to be put under the microscope, to be sure. This is a magnificent looking structure, a small city, a couple 10-20,000 people living there at a time. The narrative repeats itself. Here's the interior. Of course, all the glory goes to God. This is what the motivation for building these structures is what we were told. It's just they were very devout in their faith, these people. An early photograph of the Scott block. You can see the timeline here. Again, a multi-storied main floor, very, very tall main floor, and a spectacular mansard style roofing. And you get the feeling that this guy maybe knows something. Alright, more churches, another Presbyterian, another First Presbyterian? Maybe this is the backside of that? I don't know. Shriners Club, is that a church? I suppose you could say it is. Soldiers and Sailors Home. Those builders of the 1800s. Guys didn't need anything. Didn't need any technology, all they needed was the muscles in their arms. Something we overlook as well. Well, let's get into this first. This is the Oddfellows home apparently in Erie, Pennsylvania. This is what it says here. Could find no other evidence of this. But as I was saying, something we often overlook is the fatigue factor that comes into play during a long work day. As the day goes on, you're doing this type of heavy manual labor, especially from heights. Fatigue becomes a factor, accuracy begins to slip. So you have very short build timelines, you're told, and very, very accurately constructed buildings. Again, the two don't mesh, they don't make a lot of sense. You either need a whole lot of time, which is why they give some of those old cathedrals 1,000 years to be built, or however many hundreds of years to be built. You either need a whole lot of time, or you need a whole lot of people and technology. And in this case, we are being given neither for many of these structures in North America, because they've condensed the historical timeline. This is the St. Mary's Church, Onion Dome Central. Very, very interesting looking towers there. Difficult to construct, very difficult to construct. This making more sense for the time period. Nice gable roof, square windows, nicely constructed, very good carpentry work, but nothing like this back here. The St. Patrick's Church, and I'm not going to give you the timelines for all of these. I can guarantee you most of them are built within a 20-year period, we are told. So at a given time, there must have been several churches going up, according to the narrative they tell us. All built with this very, very tight stonework, or brick. Very, very tight, precise stonework. And I would wager that this once had some sort of top some sort of peak on it. It's been removed. And just when you thought we were finished with churches, we get the St. Stanislaus church. And it still stands. That's what it looks like today. Let's see if we can see any differences in the decoration. Have they sort of painted it all together? Doesn't stand out as much. Very similar though. Nice looking church. And we are approaching the end of the file. Is it everything you thought it would be? Erie, Pennsylvania? More? Less? Does the historical narrative fit? Is there a reason they put griffins on the Strong Vincent High School? They put griffins. Why wouldn't you? We're still doing that, aren't we? Do you have a new high school in your area that's got griffins on it? And if we're not doing it, why aren't we doing it? Some sort of beach hotel, not sure, could find very little. Looks made of brick. Very little evidence of this as well. The Villa Marie Academy. They sure loved their towers, didn't they? And again, I threw this in there because I find it very creepy. And if you know, you know. And last but not least, typically we find a YMCA. And this one still stands. Erie, Pennsylvania. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.